Okay, let's get started. So what we will do today is like I will give you a brief overview on the skills that are required for this particular role called as Salesforce Release or DevOps Engineer. And apart from that, so like I will also give you a brief background on how DevOps process works in Salesforce ecosystem. So before I start off, let me quickly introduce myself. So myself, Sai, like I have around 7 years of experience on Salesforce platform. Initially, like I worked as a Salesforce developer, and post that, I have been working as a Salesforce release engineer. So that's about me. So before I start, can I know the kind of background you people have, whether you have any kind of knowledge on Salesforce or you are completely new to Salesforce platform? So okay, if you have some kind of knowledge on Salesforce, you can type in yes in the chat. Otherwise, you can type in a no. Okay. Okay, so Bhargav, Madhu, Jetty, and Narayana. Okay, so three have some sort of experience on Salesforce, and three others doesn't have any kind of experience. Okay, fine, and thanks for responding. So generally, like what happens is like in order to handle the activities of this particular role, so you are not required to have much knowledge on Salesforce development, but if you have at least some basic knowledge on Salesforce administration, so it will be useful for you while troubleshooting some kind of errors which you get as part of this particular role. So what I will do is for those who doesn't have any kind of knowledge on Salesforce, I will try to give a brief knowledge on Salesforce admin as well. So like with that, you should be able to handle the activities of this particular role. So it's not like you should definitely have knowledge on Salesforce administration. So even without having knowledge on Salesforce admin, also you can survive in this role. But when it comes to resolving few kind of errors, having a knowledge on Salesforce administration will ease up your work. Okay, so let me share my screen. So before I present you the course content or skills that we are going to cover as part of this particular course. So let me first give you a brief background on what is meant by DevOps and how DevOps process works in Salesforce ecosystem. So when it comes to the definition of DevOps, so before understanding the term DevOps, you should be aware of few terms. Few terms. So one such term is there is something called as SDLC. Please stay on mute. Let me mute. Okay. So there is something called as SDLC. SDLC is shortcut for Software Development Lifecycle. So now the meaning of software development lifecycle is so the time period starting from planning to have an application to making the application available or making the application like we can tell it as available or ready to making the application live for end users. So generally like the purpose of building any application is so there will be some kind of users who will be accessing that particular application. And with this what happens is whenever users access the application, so what happens is the people or companies whoever have built that particular application, they will make some money out of that. So some money out of based on the number of users whoever will access that particular application. So generally so software development life cycle is something, so it is nothing but like it is the time period starting from planning to build an application to making the application available for end users. So time period from starting to plan plan having an application So, so the meaning of this is like generally when it comes to building an application, what happens is like any business whichever wants to increase its revenue, or any business whichever wants to increase its customer base. So what happens is like they will make use of something called as software applications, or if they want to sell their products. So even in that case, they will make use of these software applications. So how the development of an application starts is like whenever a business or company whichever plans to have an application in order to run their business. So when they plan to have this, what happens is like they will reach out to something called as software companies, and they will explain the kind of business whichever they are doing. So whenever business or a company does this, whenever they explain this to a software company, what happens is like in software company, so we will have different category of people. So we will have people called as architects, we will have people called as managers, and we will have people called as developers, we will have people called as testers. Likewise, like there will be different category of people in software companies. So once a business or company explains their business requirements to a software company and asks them to build an application, what happens is like based on the kind of business that particular company is doing, and based on the features whichever that particular company is expecting in the application, software company will work on software company or these group of people, the different category of people who will be available in the software companies. So they will start working on building that particular application. So there will be different phases involved in the process of building this particular application, so which can be called as software development lifecycle again. So the different phases that will be involved in the process of building an application are, so these six phases which are you are seeing on the screen. So the initial phase in the process of building an application will be planning phase. So where the business or company just plans of to have an application in order to run their business. So that's what happens in planning phase. So after the planning phase, we will have something called as defining phase. So in the defining phase, what happens is all of the features whichever a business plans to have in the application will be documented, or they will be kept on a paper. So that is what happens in defining phase. And after defining phase, there will be a phase called as designing phase. So in the designing phase, what happens is uh, people called as software architects will go through the requirements of that particular application, and they will choose a platform on which that particular application should be built. And apart from choosing the platform, so they will also figure out all of the things which needs to be implemented on that particular platform in order to build that particular application. So that's what happens in the designing phase. And after the designing phase, there will be something called as building phase. In building phase, so all of the things whichever are noted by the architects here in the designing phase, so these things whichever needs to be implemented in order to build that particular application will be passed on to a team of developers. And what happens is like the team of developers will start building that particular application, or they will start implementing those features. And once this is done, so once the application is built by the team of developers, so there will be another phase which is called as testing phase. So in the testing phase, the application whichever is built by the team of developers will be tested by someone called as testers or QA engineers. So after the application is thoroughly tested, so what happens is like the application will be made available for end users, or it will be made live. So the next phase after testing phase is deployment phase. So where the application will be deployed, or it will be made available for end users. So these are the six phases that are involved in software development lifecycle. So, and it is nothing but it is just the time period from starting to planning to have an application to building an application, or instead of saying it as building, so making the application live for end users. So that is the definition of software development life cycle. So this is how the development of an application happens in real time. Now, when it comes to the phases where a DevOps or release engineer will be involved. So you will be involved in these three phases: building phase, testing phase, and deployment phase. So when it comes to the other three phases, there will be some other kind of roles who will be handling these three phases. And as a DevOps or release engineer, you will be handling these three phases, or you will be part of these three phases: building phase, testing phase, and deployment phase. Now, next term which you should be aware of is, so there is something called as environment. So environment in software terminology is nothing but it is a place where an application lives or runs in order to understand this particular term. So in order to understand the meaning of environment, so you can consider a computer, or even a mobile phone as well. So if you look at computer or mobile phone, so computer is nothing but it is a collection of physical components. Even the same thing happens with mobile phone as well. So let's consider the case of a computer. So computer is nothing but it is a collection of physical components which makes up that particular device. On top of this, what happens is, like, people will install something called as operating system. So operating system is nothing but it is a kind of software. So on top of the physical collection of components, we will install something called as operating system. And on top of operating system, we will install something called as applications. So together, the physical components that makes up the computer and the operating system makes up the environment that will be required for an application to run. So the same thing happens with the mobile phone as well. So if you look at a mobile phone, again, mobile phone is nothing but it is a collection of physical components. On top of those physical components, whichever makes up the mobile device, we will again install something called as operating system. And on top of operating system, we will install applications, and we will make use of those applications. So together, the physical components, whichever makes up the mobile device, and the operating system makes up the environment. So in simple terms, environment is a place where an application lives or runs in. And apart from environment, so in the process of developing an application, so we will be making use of different types of environments. So what happens is, like, there you will see different types of environments, like development environments, and you will see something called as testing environments, and you will see something called as live environments. So the meaning of these environments is, so development environment is the place where the development of an application happens. Testing environment is the place where the testing of application happens, and live environment is the place where the actual application will be used by the end user, or the application will be used by the live users. So there are some valid reasons because of which people will use different environments in the process of building an application. So you may get a doubt like why we should use multiple environments instead of using a single environment in order to build an application. So there are some valid reasons for this, because in the process of building an application, what happens is, like, people will face some kind of challenges. So in the process, in order to overcome those challenges, what happens is, like, we will be making use of different environments. So let me tell you a simple example in order to tell you a reason because of which people will go with multiple environments instead of building the application in same environment and testing it again in the same environment where it was built, and using the application in the same environment. So I will tell you one simple reason because of which people will go with multiple environments instead of handling or doing all of these activities in a single environment. So if you consider a case of a banking application, so let's consider the example of a banking application. So when it comes to banking application, so what happens with banking application is, so generally, like, the purpose why people will make use of banking applications is in order to transfer money from their account to another account. So let's assume that there are two users. Name of one user is user one, and he is holding an account whose account number is account 1, and let's assume that balance in his account is some 1 lakh, and let's assume that there is one more user whose name is user 2 and whose account number is account 2, and let's assume that balance in his account is some 2 lakh. Now, let's assume that person who is holding account 1 wants to transfer 50,000 from his account to account 2. So now, in order to do this, what happens is like the person whoever is holding this particular account, he will initiate a transaction from his account to user two's account. So like by in the process of initiating the transaction, what happens is like he will first add user two as a beneficiary in his account, or as a beneficiary or as a payee in his account, and after adding that, he will initiate a transaction. So while initiating the transaction, what happens is like he will select the person or account to which the money needs to be transferred, as well as um, he will also enter the money or amount that needs to be transferred. So now let's assume that he initiated a transaction, like he selected the account to which the money needs to be transferred, and he also entered the amount that needs to be transferred. So let's assume that user 1 has initiated a transaction of 50k to user 2's account. Now, so before this transaction happens, what happens is like the application should have the capability to check whether user one's account has a balance of equal to or greater than 50,000. So here, if user one's account doesn't have uh, a balance of 50,000 or greater than 50,000, so the transaction should not happen. So ideally, the transaction should happen only if amount to be transferred is less than or equal to the balance in that particular account. So this check should happen automatically, or the application should have the capability to do this check. And after the transaction happens, so couple of things should happen. So one thing is balance in user two's account should get updated, and the amount whichever got credited should get added to the existing balance, and the new balance should reflect. And balance in user one account also should get updated, so the amount whichever is transferred should be deducted from the existing balance, and the new balance should get reflected. So now let's assume a case like if this kind of application is built, tested, and if it is used by the live users in one single environment. So what happens is, so we will like people will not be able to figure out some kind of issues. So let's assume a case like it was built, tested, and deployed or used by the users in one single environment. So in such cases, what happens is like if people starts making use of an application in the same environment where the application is built or tested, what happens is like we might see some kind of issues. So once people start making use of the application, if you notice some kind of issues, so then what happens is like it will be a kind of loss to the business. So let's assume a case like, so once people started using that particular application, you noticed, or banking people noticed, that transactions are happening from one account to another account, even though balance in the balance in the accounts from which transactions will be placed is less than the amount to be transferred. So let's assume that a bank has noticed this kind of issues. So like if transactions are happening even though the amount in the account is less than the amount to be transferred, so it is a kind of loss to the bank. So so this is an example of one issue, so which we will see if we develop and develop, test, and build the application in one single environment. So likewise, there are some valid reasons because of which people will not prefer developing the application in a single environment. So people will make use of multiple environments. Like there are again valid reasons because of which we can't test and build an application in one single environment. So there are some valid reasons for this. So I will come to those reasons once the actual session starts. Once the actual course starts, like we will see the valid reasons after covering some topics. So for now, so you can keep in mind like the reason why people will go with multiple environments is like there are some valid reasons for that. So like in simple terms, you can keep in mind like, so in the process of developing an application, so people will face some kind of challenges. In order to overcome those challenges, we will go with or we will make use of multiple environments. Now, when it comes to the meaning of DevOps, so DevOps is a process. So it is a process which is used in software development lifecycle. So which aims to improve, or instead of saying it as used in software development lifecycle, it is a process which is used in the process of building an application, which is used in the process of building an application, which aims to improve the efficiency of software development lifecycle. So this is the definition of DevOps. So in order to understand how DevOps will improve the efficiency of software development lifecycle, first you should be aware of the challenges which people will face in the process of developing an application. So we will see those challenges and how it improves in the actual once the actual sessions starts. So it improves the efficiency of software development lifecycle. Now, next thing is, so when it comes to how DevOps process works in Salesforce ecosystem, so Salesforce is a cloud CRM platform. So when it comes to Salesforce, what happens is, so before telling you how DevOps process works on Salesforce platform, so generally, like as a DevOps engineer, so what like the kind of activities which you will be doing is, so you will be responsible for creating environments and apart from creating environments, you will be responsible for configuring something called as pipelines. So configuring pipelines, or you will be responsible for something called as establishing CI/CD process. And so instead of saying it as configuring pipelines, let's take it as establishing something called as CI/CD process, or we can also tell it as establishing DevOps process. And apart from this, you will be responsible for migrating the application code from one environment to another environment, migrating the code from one environment to another environment. And apart from this, you will be responsible for providing access to people to these environments. So on a high level, so these are the activities or responsibilities of a DevOps engineer. So when it comes to creating environments, creation of environments on Salesforce platform is a very simple thing. So because uh, as it is a cloud platform, what happens with Salesforce is like it will come up with a lot of pre-built features, and so you are not even required to take care of the infrastructure. So underlying like infrastructure. So generally, like when it comes to DevOps process on some other platforms, what happens is like you will be able to take care of the infrastructure as well. So, but when it comes to Salesforce, what happens is like you are not responsible to take care of the infrastructure management, and creation of environments is a very simple thing. You can create environments just by point and clicking. And apart from creating the environments, so you will be responsible for setting up something called a CI/CD process. So, like in order to set up CI/CD process, you should have knowledge on something called as Git, so which is a version control system. And apart from having knowledge on Git, so you should have knowledge on at least like a couple of scripting knowledges. Uh, Sorry, so at least knowledge on a couple of scripting languages. So you should have knowledge on something called as YAML. So apart from YAML, it's up to you. You can have knowledge on Python or some other kind of scripting languages. So apart from this, so you should have knowledge on, so like in order to establish CI/CD process, so you should have knowledge on how you can automate something called as deployments. So like when you have knowledge on YAML and Git, you will be you will get that knowledge as well. So on a high level, you should have knowledge on either one or a couple of scripting languages, and you should have knowledge on something called as Git. So in Git, you should be aware of some of the features of Git. And when it comes to migrating the code from one environment to another environment, you should have knowledge on something called as build tools. And apart from build tools, like we have also some automated tools available for Salesforce platform. So you should have knowledge on these build tools or automated tools. And when it comes to creating environments, you should have some admin knowledge or config knowledge on the different types of environments are available on Salesforce platform, and you should be aware of how we can create them and how we can manage them. And when it comes to providing access to people, again, this is a very simple thing. So providing access to people to the environments is a very simple thing. So so like when it comes to creating environments and providing access, it will be a simple thing. So now the thing is like you should be having these two, like when it comes to establishing CI/CD process and migrating the code, so you should be aware of few tools. So these are the activities which you will be primarily handling as a Salesforce release or DevOps engineer. So now, when it comes to the skills that we are going to cover as part of this particular course, so I will mostly cover like uh, majority of the tools, so which with which you will be able to handle all of the activities of this particular role. So how the course goes on is like initially, like I'll start up with a tool called as Workbench. So generally, Workbench is a web-based tool. So with the help of which we can what we can do is like we can migrate code in one Salesforce environment to another Salesforce environment. So it's a kind of basic or foundation for Salesforce migration. So that's why like I will start off with the Workbench. So after Workbench, so on Salesforce, like we have primarily two build tools. One is Salesforce CLI and the other one is Ant migration tool. So generally nowadays, what is happening is like people are not making use of Ant migration tool, but majority of the projects are making use of something called as Salesforce CLI or SFDX as well. So after Workbench, I will cover Salesforce CLI or SFDF. So here we will see the features of Salesforce CLI, and we will see how we can migrate Salesforce code from one Salesforce environment to another Salesforce environment. So after this, what happens is like I will cover something called as some basics of shell. So I will cover what is meant by shell and some basic shell commands. Like I will cover apart from covering the basics of shell. So I will also tell you the different types of shell available on different operating system. After that, I will tell you some basic shell commands which will be useful for you while configuring something called as pipelines, or it will be useful for you while running the while making use of build tools as well. So after covering shell, so we will see the rules of YAML language. So after doing this, what happens is I will consider an example of a real-time project. So where we will use Bitbucket as the version control system, and CLI as the build tool. So we'll consider a case of a real-time project where we will assume that there will be two development teams, a testing team, and we will have a live environment. And apart from that, we will consider Bitbucket as the repository and the Salesforce CLI as the build tool. And what we will do is we will set up the CI/CD or DevOps process from the scratch for that particular project. So in the process of setting up that particular project, we will also cover Git as well. So I will cover all of the features of Git which you should be aware of. So here in this particular project model, what happens is like I will consider examples of real-time scenarios. So real-time scenarios which developers will work on. So I will build those real-time requirements in development environments, and we will see the migration process from development environment to testing environment, and from testing environment to UAT environment. So likewise, what happens is like we will almost cover all of the things which people will configure in real-time projects. So after this, so after seeing this particular Bitbucket and CLI project, so next thing is we will see something called as Copado. So Copado is a kind of automated tool. Copado is a kind of automated tool designed for Salesforce platform. So we will see all of the features of Copado, which people will make use of in real-time projects. So when it comes to the tools, whichever I will be covering as part of this particular course, so there will be trial versions available for each and every tool, and we will be making use of those trial versions in order to understand the features of that specific tool. So after covering Copado, so when it comes to even for Copado, what happens is like I will again consider the case of a real-time project. We will set up all of the things from scratch. So setting up all of the things from scratch means, so we will create the environments. We'll create something called as repository, and after creating the repository, we will see how we can automate the deployments using pipelines. And after that, so after setting up the initial process, we will consider examples of real-time use cases, and we will see we will build those use cases in development environments, and we will migrate those things whichever we build from a development environment to testing environments, and we will migrate them from testing environments to production or live environment. So that's how each and every project model goes. So when it comes to Copado, so there are two variants for Copado. One is Copado Enterprise and the other one is Copado Essentials. So first we will cover Copado Enterprise, and then later we will cover something called as Copado Essentials. So after this, so after covering Copado, so we will see something called as sandboxes. So sandboxes is nothing but these are the different types of environments available on Salesforce platform. And after covering sandboxes, we will see something called as chain sets. So chain sets is a native deployment feature offered by Salesforce. So initially, like people used to make use of chain sets in order to migrate components from one environment to another environment. So nowadays, people are not much using chain sets, because like they are making use of some other kind of tools. So because like Salesforce chain sets has some disadvantages which other tools will overcome. When it comes to chain sets and ant migration tool, so even though people are not making use of these things nowadays, so the reason why I am going to cover this chain sets as well as ant migration tool is it will be useful for you while giving interviews, because in interviews like they will test your knowledge on these change sets and migration tool as well. So after covering the two variants of Copado, so we will consider one more project model where we will use GitHub as the repository and CLI as the build tool. So here, the difference between the Bitbucket project model and the GitHub project is, so here we will be making use of something called as GitHub Actions in order to automate the deployments. While in Bitbucket, what happens is like we will make use of something called as Bitbucket pipelines in order to automate the deployments. So after covering these, what happens is like earlier I used to give a brief overview on how we can set up the DevOps process using AutoRabbit. But when it comes to AutoRabbit, it is a licensed tool, and we won't get a trial version for AutoRabbit. So that's why what I'm doing is like I'm replacing this AutoRabbit with GateSet. So we will see how we can set up the CI/CD process using GateSet from scratch. So apart from that, if you want, like I can also give you a brief overview on how we can set up the process using AutoRabbit. So when it comes to the course duration, so it will be around some 25 to 30 days, and each day we will be having a session of 1 hour, and the timing of the session will be decided based on the feedback whichever we collect from the people whoever are willing to continue in this particular course. So replacing AutoRabbit is nothing but so as AutoRabbit is a licensed tool, so we won't be able to get a trial version in order to understand the features of it. So instead of covering AutoRabbit, I will be covering GateSet. So and again, so when it comes to the kind of opportunities which you will have for this particular role, so like Salesforce release or DevOps engineer role is in evolving phase. So it's in evolving phase means like there are not many resources in the market who have this particular skill, and so like as there are less resources in the market with this particular skill, and as it is in the evolving phase, so you will have a good chance of cracking this particular role if you acquire this particular skill set. So when it comes to Copado robotic testing, as a DevOps or release engineer, you won't be require knowledge on Copado robotic testing. So that knowledge is required for testers. So like you should have knowledge on just configuring that CRT process, or just configuring or including that CRT in your pipeline. But you are not required to have knowledge on how the testing framework works. So that's it from me for today. So if you have any questions, you can stay back and ask me. Otherwise, you can drop off. So like I will continue. I will start the course from the next session. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. Otherwise, you can drop off.
So the tools which you are using is like AutoRabbit, Copado, Workbench, and Chainsets. Is that correct?
So in Bitbucket, we are going to see Bitbucket pipelines. GitHub, in GitHub, we are going to see GitHub Actions. So CLI and migration tool. So I won't consider Tailset as a tool. We are going to cover two variants of Copado, Enterprise Copado Essentials, and we'll see Tailset. And if you want to know the features of AutoRabbit, we will the AutoRabbit as well on like how we can configure the things using AutoRabbit. So, like I will take a document, like present a documentation, and I will explain how we can configure the things on AutoRabbit using that particular documentation, because like we won't get a trial version for AutoRabbit.
Okay, got it.
Any other question, anyone?
Yeah, this is Sayed. Just I need to understand sales first. Regarding for me, it is very new because recently where I work right now, they are changing the infrastructure from uh, data center to the all applications are moving on the Salesforce. So they are using that the Salesforce Capado is the same thing, or Salesforce is different things. What is that?
So when it comes to Copado, so
Mm.
Salesforce is a platform on which we can build applications. When it comes to Copado, it is an automated tool which is designed in order to set up the CI/CD process for Salesforce platform. So it is a kind of CI/CD tool. Copado is a CI/CD tool.
Is this different thing, but it is used for as a for automation kind of things, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Um, Basically, I don't have any be honest. Like this is the first time I'm trying to after this had happened in my own organization. That's why I'm just trying to understand. So, do we need a Salesforce admin first, or just go with the Copado kind of things?
So without Salesforce admin knowledge as well, you can survive in this particular role. So this this course is for someone who want to start their career as a Salesforce release or DevOps engineer. So it is not like you should definitely have knowledge on Salesforce admin. So
Mm-hmm.
without having Salesforce admin knowledge as well, you can understand the skills of this particular role.
So this is used for the programmer, right? Not for the infrastructure support kind of things. No, right?
No.
Okay.
So, no, not for infrastructure support. So
Mm-hmm.
these skills will be explicitly used in order to handle the skills of release or DevOps engineers. Explicitly Salesforce release or DevOps engineer. So there are roles called as Salesforce release or DevOps engineer, and these skills will be used for that particular role.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Uh, Yes, like in Salesforce, we have sandboxes, no, where we can practice by creating free orgs. So I say in the same way, can we practice in Copado also by creating the free orgs?
Yeah, yeah, we can create.
Okay, okay. So will you be giving any assignments every day, like based any scenarios for us to practice in the Copado or something similar to it, so that we can practice, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, so generally, like after each and every session, so I will share some kind of notes, and like recordings will be uploaded to a drive, and you will get the drive access. And I will also share you some kind of task for practice as well. So when it comes to tasks, what happens is like you can uh, do the same things whichever I explain you in the uh, like in the sessions, because like in sessions what happens is like I will take examples of real time scenarios only. You can implement the same set of things uh, on your systems, and apart from that I will also like share some kind of tasks as well, but mostly like task will you can instead of sharing them separately, what happens is like you can start implementing the things whichever I will do in the actual sessions.
Okay, we can log into the Copado free tool and we can exactly execute whatever you say in the call, right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from anyone? Any batch plan for SF Devoral? So I'm not going to train you on development or administration. So you can check with the institute people on whether they have any separate batches for that or not. And when it comes,
Hi, Sai. Is
yeah,
it audible?
yeah, you are
Yeah.
audible.
So this training is, as you mentioned, specifically only for the Copado, right? So the thing is, the people those are looking to get into DevOps. So
No,
is one of that DevOps, is it, or this tool itself is enough? There is no other rest of the training part needs to be attended or completed.
so this course is not like it is just for someone who should have knowledge on Copado. So what I'm trying to tell here is this course is someone who want to start their position as a Salesforce release or DevOps engineer. So I'm going to cover all of the skills. Like I'm going to cover majority or all of the skills which a Salesforce release or DevOps engineer should have. So it's not only Copado, like we are covering Bitbucket, GitHub Actions, and something called as GearSet, and we are going to cover a couple of build tools like CLI and AMP migration tool as well.
Okay. So there would be any project also like real-time hands-on, like in terms of experience or what we can put ourselves in directly in the market for claiming Salesforce release engineer. How
Come again, I didn't understand your question.
like during this training course, there would be any projects or hands-on experience also would be provided so that the
So
candidate can directly claim themselves as a Salesforce release engineer or DevOps engineer
yeah,
or anything else is required to claim for the profile.
yeah, already understood. So actually, when it comes to training experience, so like you will be making use of trial accounts in order to practice all of the things which are I'm going to tell in the cover in the course. So like even I'm going to consider cases of real-time projects only and real-time use cases. You can implement those use cases in the trial account. So it will give you a kind of training or real-time exposure only.
Sure, fine. Yeah. Any particular programming language is also required for this?
No, so if you have knowledge on couple of scripting knowledges, like you won't be requiring knowledge on programming languages while using some tools, but when it comes to configuring like when it comes to automating deployments on some kind of git providers like Bitbucket or GitHub or Azure DevOps, you will require knowledge on at least one scripting knowledge, and we are going to cover YAML language as part of this particular course. Even without this scripting knowledge also you can survive in this particular role, because it completely depends on the kind of tools which you will make use of in order to set up the CI/CD process. So if you get a chance to work on a tool like Copado, you are not required to have any kind of programming knowledge. So the same thing gets applicable to other kind of automated tools like AutoRabbit, GateSet, FlowSum. So there are some set of automated tools available. So if you get a chance to work on those automated tools, you won't be required to have a knowledge on scripting or programming. So majority of the openings are even on those automated tools only. Yeah, so it completely depends on the project.
Now GearSet is free, as I like,
No, no,
and
it's
like Copado.
no, both GateSet and Copilot are licensed
Okay.
tools, but we'll get trial versions in order to understand the
Yeah,
future.
for trial version also, like GearSet is providing, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
Copado. Okay.
Yes,
AutoRabbit they are not providing.
yeah.
Sai, the trial version has all the features which are in the real version. I mean, so that we can practice all the features, no?
So generally, like when it comes to trial versions, they will have some 90% of the features. I can't tell like they will have 100% features. So we will have majority of the features. Like there will be some features which we can't make use of, but we will have most of the features which we can play around in trial versions.
Okay, okay, got it. And also, will you be guiding in installing Visual Studio and configuring according to Salesforce requirements and all?
I,
Okay, okay.
yeah. So course duration, like it will be for 20, something between 25 to 30 hours only. It won't be possible to reduce or complete it fastly, because like I will be taking multiple batches, and I won't even have that time to take more hours in a single day. Yeah, so like if you are not able to attend the session, so definitely like institute people will upload the daily session recordings. You can go through the recordings as well. Okay. So, okay then. So, uh, so like you can decide on whether to continue in the course or not, and you can join for the next session. So from the next session, so I'll be starting the actual course. Okay then. Thank you all. We'll again meet in the next session.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So before I wrap up, okay. My question is, what are common tools that are used for testing apart from Copado? So even I am not much aware of the other kind of testing tools, Madhu, because I am not the one who will be dealing with testing. Okay then. So I'll end this session here and we'll meet again in the next session. Thank you.